Early voting, as we said, has begun in the state of Georgia as well as many other states. Here tomorrow in Tennessee, it opens up. And look, Georgia's my original home state. I got a few home states. You've probably been like, Logan, I've heard you claim Florida. I've heard you claim Tennessee. I've heard you claim Georgia. These are all places I grew up. Virginia, New York. I spent a lot of time kind of up and down the East Coast. But Georgia's where I was born. It's where I first voted. My first two presidential elections, I believe I voted in the state of Georgia, at least the first one. So I'm very familiar with that scenario. I'm very familiar with that state. It's different than, when I visit now, it's definitely different than the state I left when I was 15 years old, but it's still there. Georgia, as we know, historically has voted Republican in all but two of the last elections in the last 4 decades. That's for president. And the last time was Bill Clinton. And then, of course, Joe Biden took Georgia for the first time in a very long time. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with Atlanta. If you look at that, there's always a blue dot and a big sea of red. That's what it's like in Atlanta. Look, where we are in Tennessee, it's like Nashville or Memphis. There are blue dots in primarily red states. Now, for a place like Tennessee, likely those still go red. They still are Republican-centered. Georgia's a little bit different because so many people live in Atlanta. And so much has changed in Atlanta in terms of Hollywood moving in and everything happening that you have a total shift in really the landscape of Georgia. And so many people have left. We got a lot of calls coming in from all over the country. We're going to first start off with Michael, who's calling in the state of Florida. One of my favorite states, home state of Florida, who is an ACLJ champion. So Michael, I appreciate it. Go ahead with your comment.
I'm usually the voter that votes Election Day, but this time I'm voting early and I'm taking my kids, their wives, and we have probably 15 to 18 people coming with us early voting.
I think that's a good plan. I plan on early voting this year. I've kind of gone back and forth. I like that. I know a lot of people like the electricity on Election Day. That's sort of fun to go and experience it. Because it is a little like, it's an American tradition to go on Election Day, vote, and get your sticker and all that. If I get my sticker tomorrow, I'm walking around going, okay, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to hold on to this thing for 2.5 weeks? But I think Michael is right, which is they're telling everyone to go vote early. You never know what's going to happen. He's in the state of Florida. We know the hurricane season is happening. We've seen what's happened in North Carolina. You never know what could stop you from being there on Election Day. Traffic, 4-hour lines. People have very busy lives. Stuff gets in the way. So as much as it is important to go vote, it is more important to make sure that you have the opportunity to vote. Like I said, early voting opens tomorrow here in the state of Tennessee. Do I think I'm going to vote tomorrow? Probably not. But will I try to do it before we get to Election Day? Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are some of those rules in here. It says, I'll pull those up, where you can at least vote for the next 16 days in the state of Georgia, with some counties even offering an extra voting day on Sunday, November 1st. And of course, the following Tuesday, a week from then, we will have the general election. And it's going to be crazy, and it's going to get wild. And what I really hope and pray is that we have some answers fairly quickly, that this isn't another situation where we're 2 or 3 months from now still talking about it. But it very well might be. I think after 2020, all bets are off. And of course, we all, if you were there, if you remember, I deal with a lot of students now, so that they weren't there for it because they're all in their early 20s. But you may remember, the Bush-Gore years or the Bush-Gore election, and that also strung on for weeks and weeks. I think we romanticize a little bit these years where there was definitive victors, when there was a Obama or there was a George W. Bush. Those elections, or George W. Bush the second time, we kind of forget that obviously with Trump and Clinton, there was issues. With Trump and Biden, there was issues. There's issues, a lot of issues with Bush and Gore. And I'm sure historically, if you go back even further, there were times when it was like this. It's not that uncommon. But what I'm hoping for, just for the sanity of the country, is that we have some answers on election night, though I'm not going to be shocked if this goes weeks and weeks. But unfortunately, and it feels like technology and everything should move forward where we don't have to do it. Let's continue on with some of these phone calls. Let's see who we're going to go to next. Let's go to Karen in California. California's been an interesting state recently because you have President Trump making stops there, historic stops, as again, a state that likely is not going to end up voting for President Trump, but he knows also there's a lot of areas, a lot of red areas where down ballot. That's important. You want to have support out there in California. And we obviously know that it's a Democratic stronghold, so you don't necessarily always hear from that candidate as well. But Karen, you're on the air.
Hi there. I was told to go ahead and take my ballot that I get mailed in the mail straight to the voting polls and go ahead and surrender them there and then do a new one right there and put it into the machine right away. What happened to a friend of mine and her husband, who happened to be Republican, they had signed theirs. She had taken it to the clerks, put it in the mailbox. It came back later that they were disqualified because their signatures did not match.
Didn't match. Yeah, I think, Karen, we hear that a lot, actually, with the mail-in voting and with even absentee voting, which is once they actually go through the process of doing it, a lot of ballots are thrown out because signatures don't match on your ID. And look, I can tell you, like my driver's license signature, I think I did when I was, here in the state of Tennessee, like when I was 18. I'm now 38, 39 almost. This is... it's not like my signature hasn't evolved over the years. So I would suggest that. I don't know about the mail-in situation in California. It seems like it's getting crazier, as we know that even members of our staff who have moved here, who have made the big exit of California and moved to Tennessee, we're getting their mail-in ballots sent to them, even here in Tennessee, from the state of California. So I'm not sure the rules and regulations there, but I do think that early voting is good. The absentee and the mail-in, a lot of times, especially with those absentee votes, they don't get counted till much later. And often only if necessary. I mean, inevitably they will, but sometimes they are, it sounds sad to say, but they become inconsequential as the election has been decided and far over. So if you do have the opportunity to vote in person, but you can vote early, that's something that we obviously encourage here, regardless of who you're voting for. Whether you're voting for Trump, whether you're voting for Harris, whether you're voting for a third party, but that is the way to make sure, hopefully, your vote is counted properly. The Georgia Secretary of State, as of 9:30 this morning, already said 72,000 people have already voted in the state. Of course, we're sure that's more now. That's probably crested over 100,000. Reports are that people are waiting 40 minutes to an hour in line to vote today. That is early voting day. That's pretty wild. I don't anticipate that to stay that way, but for right now, people are going to do it. Let's continue on with some of these calls. Let's go to Robin in Nevada. Robin, you're on the air.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Me and my husband, we always early vote. We always walk to the place and walk in. We do it every season, every voting season.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. And I like some people hey, we bring our kids to do that. Some area school gets out, not I think if probably some public schools that are used as polling places. If you have the opportunity to take your kids, I always enjoyed that as a kid to go and to learn. They used to have setups where you could even pretend to vote in the corner. I don't think they still do that anymore. It's much more efficient. This was when it was still paper ballots, and you would go and they'd even taught you how to do it. Here's how you punch out the spot, or here's how you fill in the. Those are things that we're losing a little bit in America, especially when educating our children. And I know things are going to change. Obviously, it's changed dramatically since I was a kid when it started as paper ballots, moved to digital. Most of my voting life has been digital now. But I do think there should be that education of here's what we're doing, here's why it's important. Teach your kids, your grandkids, here's why we do this, how you decide who you're going to vote for. We used to do kids pick the president. We used to do that at school. They used to do that on Nickelodeon. They still may. When I worked there, they were doing kids pick the president. And they didn't always, a lot of times it did because your parents influenced who you'd vote for, but it didn't always end up being the person who won. Always pretty interesting. I think we need to do that. Keep educating. One of the things we put out 4 years ago was a puppet video on our Bald Beagle YouTube channel, which is for children. It's a kids YouTube American history and social studies kind of channel that we have on there. Some great content that we produced. And one of them is a long-form video of why the Electoral College is important. Because you may have heard recently in the news, people like Tim Walz and other people saying, hey, I think it's time we need to go to popular vote, abolish the Electoral College. The Harris campaign was like, well, we didn't say that, but he said it. And we think it's a good reminder, not just for your kids, maybe for you as well, of why we don't live in a country where it's all dictated by popular vote, because you want to be represented across the country.